Welcome to First Alarm Family First, episode 21. I'm Jen Herrera here with Carolyn Acosta, and we are lucky enough to have another great guest with us today.
Yes, joining us today is Conrad Weaver, an award-winning filmmaker, storyteller, and mental health advocate. He's created a powerful documentary. It is PTSD 911, which sheds light on mental health struggles for first responders, what they face every day, so that they get to tell their stories. In addition to that, he also has a podcast, First Responders Wellness Podcast, which is a wonderful podcast that I've been listening to. It was pretty after I lost Alex because I wanted to find answers, and I found it very informative. Conrad, thank you for being with us here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here and connect with you all.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you started this journey?
Yeah, so I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been doing this for full time for a number of years now, and I've produced 4 feature-length documentaries, and with different subjects, very different. Some of them are very different than the PTSD 911. But it was back in 2017, 2018 that I was working on a documentary about the opioid crisis right here in Maryland. As it has affected many, many communities, and it touched our community very, very deeply. And so I was working on that film, and as a part of that, I was doing ride-alongs with first responders and with police and fire and EMS teams. And one day I was with a police officer, and while I didn't want anyone to overdose, if there was going to be an overdose, which there probably was, I wanted to be there. And so, of course, the call came in, and lights and sirens were off to the scene, got there, and it was a fatal overdose. Young woman, mom was screaming downstairs while her daughter lay deceased in the bathroom. And it was a scene that I was not familiar with at all, had never experienced that. And all the first responders on scene were, it's just Tuesday. And so I was like, that's really not a normal human response to something like this. So I started researching how PTSD affects first responders and uncovered this whole issue. So I went back to the officer I was with that day and I said, hey, do you guys suffer from PTSD? And she was like, oh, if you only knew the half of it. And then she said, if you want to make a documentary about that, I'll do anything I can to help you. And what we didn't realize was that she would become one of the main characters in the PTSD 911 film. And so that started my journey into this, into the subject. And that was in late 2019 when we started working on this. And of course, 2020, we all know what happened there. But that really allowed us to then dig deep and find stories. And so we launched a website we had a form on there, and people would submit their stories, and we vetted those stories and landed on the 3 subjects that are now the main subjects of this film. And with a dispatcher out of Boston, a firefighter out of Anaheim, California, and then our local officer here in Maryland. And so I went over the next 3 years and helped to tell their story.
Conrad, you said that they filled out forms or applications to tell their story. Were you surprised? Was there an abundance, or were you surprised by the reluctance of people who were willing to come forward, or did you get a pretty good response?
We got a pretty good response from it. I had a co-producer, Nancy, who helped vet those stories. And so what we would do is she would set up a Zoom call and have discussions with these folks. And some of them were looking for their 15 minutes. You get those, so put those aside, and not to disparage their story at all. All of them had stories. Some of them, you could obviously tell some people were in a better place than others. And so it was challenging to figure out, okay, whose stories do we include and why? And the dispatcher that we selected was actually, she filled out the form, but it was because another friend that she knew had reached out to me and said, hey, I have a friend who's really well-spoken. She has a fantastic story. She may be somebody that you're looking for the 911 side of things. And so, once Nancy had a Zoom call with her, it was like oh my goodness, she's amazing. Um, has an amazing story and is well spoken and is funny and all the things. And so it was a pretty easy decision then. But yeah, there were people, and I still get emails from people. I have a story to tell.
Hmm.
And so that's sometimes challenging to say, well, the film's done and we're not looking for more stories. So,
Right.
And I think your documentary too highlights, as civilians, what we think first responders should be able to handle all these things because this is the career that they've picked. And we truly see now that no human being can handle it. So I love how you give them a place to talk and talk about their experiences, but us as civilians, we can actually understand and see what they're really going through. Because as a spouse, I had no idea.
mm-hmm.
Jen, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Not like I do now, Carolyn. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I do now. Did you realize that was happening in the making of it?
um, so circle back to that question again, just so I could better understand.
Just the impact the civilian response would
Hmm.
have.
Yeah, for me as a civilian, digging into this, it was really eye-opening. It was really like, wow, these folks are really, a lot of them are very deeply affected by it. And then like, Maddie's wife is featured in the film, the firefighter Maddie. And she talks about her experience. She said we started dating, and she talks about this in the film, and all of a sudden, he was laying on the floor crying, in the fetal position, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was happening, with him.
I want to go back a little bit, talking about those initial responses that you got,
Mhm.
and the initial response, or not the responses that you said you still get, Conrad. And
Mhm.
we do want to help everybody, right? We want to be able to tell
Absolutely,
everybody's story,
absolutely.
especially in the industry
Mhm.
that you're in. I'm curious the ages of the people who are willing to
Mhm.
participate, because we are seeing a generational gap when it comes to people asking for help and their willingness to share, where your younger first responders, let's say 30s, 20s, they're
Mhm.
more open to saying, hey, I need help. Hey, I need guidance. Hey, I'm not okay.
Yep.
Your mid 40, 50, 60 retirees, we're finding that they're not there yet. What did
Yep.
you find?
Yeah, I find the same. It's the younger generation, 20s, 30s, that are willing to, hey, I have a story to tell. Um, it's those older folks. In fact, one of the guys in the film that plays a kind of a minor role in the film, he's a detective out of Garland, Texas. Crusty old guy, just been there, was a Marine, man's man, just, and he said, look, I really don't want to be in your film. I don't want to get in front of camera. I don't want to tell my story. But through some coaxing from a fellow officer, he finally agreed. But his conditions were, you can't use my name and you can't use the agency I'm with.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 weeks later, I get a text, or I get an email from his fellow officer, and he said, hey, Mike says you can use his name and you can use his. And then the amazing transformation that happened with him. He came to the premiere that we had in Dallas, in the Dallas area, comes up to me. He was so proud, and shakes my hand. He said, thank you. Thank you for letting me tell my story, because now every time I tell my story, I heal a little bit more.
Yes.
And then I get about 6 months later, I get another email from my friend, and he said, Mike, he ordered one of your posters from your website, and he has it framed. He spent a lot of money on this frame, has it hanging up on his wall.
He's
He's so
proud.
proud of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I actually had him on my podcast a couple of weeks ago just to follow up. He now retired and from the agency, and he still says, that was one of the best decisions he made, to tell his story. So that he was one exception in the age gap, because he was, he's older, he's retired now.
Yeah.
But what it did for him was, it was transformative.
Yes, cathartic.
Yeah.
Conrad, is there any particular story that really just impacted you deeply?
I think the one that surprised me the most was the dispatcher story,
Mm-hmm.
because they're often the forgotten first
Mm-hmm.
responder, because we don't see them. And and how I got to make that decision to bring a dispatcher in the program was I was talking to a local firefighter in our community here, and he's also a dispatcher. He said, "Well, are you including 911 in your film?" I said, "Well, no, I haven't really thought about that. Tell me about that." He said, "Well, we hear it, we imagine it, and we don't have closure."
Right.
And so I was like, "Oh, wow, that's something." And so in the next, few years, as I spent time with dispatchers and I was in call centers, I was able to sit in and do a sit along, as they say, putting the headset on and listen in to calls. And it's really unbelievable what these call takers go through and the things they hear and the decisions they have to make quickly, realizing that they themselves can't help the person physically and sometimes that's a problem for them, that okay, I hear them struggling to breathe, I can't be there to help them,
Right.
and help is on the way, but it's taking minutes to get there, and seeing that stress on their face and experiencing that. So that for me was one of the more interesting parts of this film that I'm so glad we included.
I'm glad you told that story. Growing up, my dad's retired fire, and he would always have this very unique relationship with dispatchers. And I would run in, they were often female at the time. I think that I'm assuming it's changed since then. But, we would run into people or I'd meet somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, I was dispatched when your dad would run. And it's like they relied on each other with not being next to each other in
Yeah,
the worst circumstances.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
I,
a beautiful
I
relationship.
was talking to some folks yesterday, and they were talking about the dispatchers, and they were at these were like firefighters and police officers, and they were at some event, and they heard someone talking, and they're like, "Are you so and so?" And she said, "Yes." He said, "I knew your voice," because they never met her before in person, but they knew the voice because they would
Right.
hear it come through the radio.
I love that.
So it's
I love
just an
that.
interesting dynamic, in relationships.
For sure. I'm curious how, because you've worked on several documentaries, several
Mhm.
very successful documentaries. You're an Emmy Award winner.
Mhm.
Why did you decide to turn this film into the podcast? It kind of
Mhm.
evolved, right? Why is
Sure.
it this subject, Conrad, that really, it seems, inspired you
Yeah.
perhaps more than others in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the reasons is that every community in our country has first responders. First responders take care of our communities. They keep our communities safe. They respond to our worst days. I've had, for better or for worse, I had medics had to show up for me one time. I did a dumb thing. I didn't hydrate enough while I was exercising at home, and I was passing out, and my son called 911. Next thing I know, firefighters that I knew personally were coming in. What did you do, Conrad?
Yeah.
And so I want healthy first responders showing up to my emergency. In my time of need, I want those healthy responders to show up to take care of my emergency. And so that has become a passion of mine, to help first responders see themselves as necessary to take care of themselves. Um, you know, uh, I did a crazy thing in 23. I rode a bicycle across the country bringing this film, and I did that because I knew there were first responders in every community we would ride through, and we met many of them, stayed in firehouses, and that was just amazing experience. But then I launched the podcast, and I had actually launched the podcast. It was under a different name, actually, before the film came out. And then I had to put it on pause to actually finish the film. And then I brought it back under the name it is now, the First Responder Wellness, because I wanted to continue that conversation that the film starts. And the film does that. When we come into a community to show the film, it gives those people permission to start talking about these things. And that's what I love about that. And so the podcast kind of helps continue that conversation.
Yeah. And in your conversation and research, what do you think are the biggest barriers that the first responders like seeking help? What are they running into?
I think the biggest barrier first is their own pride, in a
Hmm.
way.
Yeah.
I'm the helper. Why do I need help? That's oftentimes the first barrier. The second barrier, I think, is just that stigma of, well, if I admit that I need help, I could be considered weak, or I could be considered the weak link in the organization. And then I think that one of the most challenging barriers, though, is and the National FOP has confirmed this, that the number one and number two stressors within an organization, within an individual and law enforcement, is the organization itself, is the politics inside, is the lack of people to take shifts, having to work overtime, all those things creates this additional stress and trauma for people. And then oftentimes we're seeing this change, but oftentimes there's not resources available to get help, or we can't take off because if we take off, then we're short staffed and then more people are going to be in trouble. And so there's a lot of challenges out there, but there are also amazing solutions that we have learned and discovered and are sharing those things through the podcast and through the people that I'm connected with around the country.
Because of the success with the reaction to the film, the sentiment that people are having to this film, and the fact that you're still getting people messaging about wanting to share their story, do you have a plan to make another film about this subject?
That's a great question. At the time, I don't, and partly because I'm getting older and schlepping gear across the country is getting a lot harder.
Hire an intern, Conrad.
Yeah,
Come on.
right. Well, my son is a filmmaker in his own right. He's down in Orlando and he's doing amazing work. And so if I needed someone, I could, twist his arm to come do that. But yeah, and to be fair, I'm actually in talks with some folks, another filmmaker, that we're kind of looking at maybe collaborating on something that will be coming down the pike in the next year or two. So stay tuned on that. Yeah. In the meantime, I'll be here in my studio podcasting. So,
do you find it cathartic? Do you find it helpful to speak to these firefighters as well, even though you're not a first responder, right? But we all have traumas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love it. There's nothing better for me to do than to hang out with firefighters, police officers, dispatchers. And that's why I love doing our screening events. In a couple of weeks, I'll be up in the Boston area doing a screening, and I can't wait to go, because I was up in Wisconsin just a few days ago with 500 police officers and dispatchers and first responders at a conference there. And I love that. I love hanging out with them. I love hearing their stories. I love engaging with them. And sometimes what brings me the most joy is when I can refer them to someone if they're struggling.
Yes.
And I can make that connection. And I've done that just about every event that I've been to. I've been able to connect people to people that I know who provide resources. And that brings me the most joy when I hear back saying, hey, I talked to Joe and we're having a session with him and he's going to be okay. And that's what it's all about.
It is. What do you hope the audience takes away from your films?
If you're a first responder, I hope that you see yourself in a new way and that you take steps to take care of yourself.
Yes. That
you reach out to someone, that you talk to someone, because that's oftentimes the first step that needs to take place, whether you're talking just to a buddy, and to be honest and say, hey, yeah, I'm not doing so well. Do you know someone I can talk to? That's usually the first step. And so that's what I want first responders to know, that there is help out there. There are people and resources that will help. And there are free resources out there. You don't have to always pay for these things. There are organizations that are funding these things that you can go away to a retreat center, or you can go away to a treatment center. And there are ways to pay for these things that you don't have to pay out of your own pocket. If you're a civilian and watching the film, I want you to go to your city leaders, go to your county leaders, your state leaders, and say, we need more resources for mental health for our first responders. Demand that, because we want healthy communities, and healthy communities, we have healthy communities when we have healthy first responders. And it's like someone said one time, I was at an event and they say, unhealthy first responders make unhealthy decisions.
Yes.
And those unhealthy decisions often end up on the evening news.
Yeah. And in so many different ways.
Yep.
That is
Absolutely.
actually put very well. Carolyn and I were at an event last night, and a young first responder who spoke. I mean, everything he said was incredibly powerful, but he said at one point, "I'm not okay."
Mm-hmm.
And hearing him say that, it shook everybody in the room.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it, excuse me,
Yeah.
that he had that impact. So, you said acknowledging that they need help is a huge.
I was at an event 2 years ago. We had a screening in Springfield, Ohio. It's been in the news many times in the last year or so. And the chief of police was sitting next to me on the stage for a post-screening panel, as we always do. And my final question to the panel is always, what do you do to take care of you? And this chief of police said, I'm going to be honest, I don't do so well.
And coming from the chief.
Coming from the chief. Which that made me happy, because that gives everyone else in her organization permission to say that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a lot of work to do.
I'm going to piggyback off what Carolyn asked a few minutes ago. She asked about the hope, that the response that you're looking for when people go to watch the film. I'm curious, and I'm assuming because of your industry and your eye, you've done this. Talk to us, Conrad, about the body language of the individuals, specifically the first responders, when they walk in to the theater or auditorium, whatever it is, to watch this film, versus their body language after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Many times they're walking in unsure. It's like, arms folded. I don't know. I had a fire chief come up to me at the end of one of our screenings. Kind of a bigger guy, arms folded. Yeah, I didn't think I had a problem until I saw your movie. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing is, at the end of the film, we have a panel discussion. We release everybody. There's talking. People are talking. There's a lot of interaction.
Right.
People stay for the whole thing. They stay for the whole Q&A. I've been to other events, other films, and other screenings where the Q&A starts and people get out. Everybody stays. I've rarely seen people leave because they want to be engaged. And so they come in quiet, contemplative. They leave talking to each other, which is what we want. We want
that's
that
everything,
conversation.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's the occasional people, and something I always do when I'm at a screening, I always stand in the back so I can read the room. Mm-hmm. And there are places in the film where I know we're going to see tears, and we always do. There are places in the film when people step out. And I tell everybody up front, if you need to step out to catch your breath, please do that. You're not going to offend me in any way. But we always make sure we check on those people. And the screening we did this past week in Wisconsin, we had a lady step out and she had tears. And so we had a mental health counselor there who went out and talked to her. And she's now in a good place. But the film does that. It triggers things in people and triggers different things in different people. And so we always want to have people in the room who are there to can speak to that and to help someone if they're struggling. And so I always like watching the audience from the back just to see what they're thinking, what they're, mm-hmm. And as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, are they on their phone? Are they bored? It tells me something too,
Right.
So,
right.
And that's always a worry. How many people are going to get their phone out and be,
scrolling?
Yeah. So how can people support your work and what you're doing? Where can they watch this PTSD 911 or listen to your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is the First Responder Wellness Podcast. It's available anywhere podcasts are distributed. It's on YouTube as well. The film is available on Amazon for the general public. So if you just search PTSD 911 on Amazon, you can find it. It's available to rent or to stream there. It is also available. We have it available as a resource for first responder agencies. We sell it as a kit with this film, along with another film and a bunch of other resources, some interviews that we didn't put in the final cut of the film that agencies. We've had over 153 agencies from around the country have purchased this and are using it within their agency for training. And then the other way that we love doing is having screening events around the country, bringing the first responder community together, bringing the city leaders together. Whenever we do one of these public events, I was like, get your elected officials in the room, because when they're in the room, they better understand what first responders face, and they can better and more quickly say yes to resources. And we've had that very thing happen. We had a screening here on the Eastern Shore in Maryland, and the city manager was in the room. The fire chief was there, the police chief was there, and the city manager. He came up to me afterwards. He says, wow. He says, we have some work to do. So when the city manager buys in, they're going to be provided resources to be taken care of. And so those kind of things, we love doing those things. And then just for the general public to come out and to be interacting with first responders, to meet that police officer, that firefighter, that dispatcher who maybe they've only talked to on a 911 call, when they can actually meet them in person, they can see the humanity behind these folks, and that they realize that they're just normal people like you and me who do extraordinary work and themselves are being impacted in extraordinary ways.
Conrad, Carolyn and I know what it's like to be part of firefighter families. What has it been like for you? Because I imagine they've embraced you into this brotherhood, because it truly is a really special thing to be a part of.
Yeah. It is really an honor for me to be accepted by these folks. And I go back, a number of years. I used to live in Emmitsburg, Maryland, which is like Firetown, USA. The National Fire Academy's here. The National Emergency Training Center's here. And so I was in with the local the all volunteer fire department. So I kind of hung out with them. I even had permission to ride on the trucks, if I needed to. And so I've been around them for a while. And then when the first film, the Heroine's Grip film, where I was doing a ride along with the sheriff's department and others, just to be accepted by them, that no, I'm just a normal dude that's not, I'm not a Hollywood type, going to be doing an expose on their, shenanigans, and to be accepted by them. And now to have police chiefs and fire chiefs who texting me, who are, calling me and are reaching out, that means the world. To have those kind of relationships and to be accepted, and then to ride a bicycle across the country and you roll up to a firehouse and they say, what do you need? Well, a place to sleep. Well, we got a room back here. Or they say, what are you doing for dinner? I'm like, nothing. Well, we got a brisket on the smoker. I'm like, okay, what time's dinner? And just having those kind of experiences, is so much fun. And I love what I do.
Yeah. So I bet you had some good dinners at those fire stations.
Oh yeah. And of course, we're in the middle of dinner eating brisket, and the tones go off and out the door they go, we're like, okay, I guess we'll finish it up.
You got to experience the real thing.
Yep.
Conrad, can we try and make plans for you to come down here to South Florida?
Absolutely. I would love that. Yes.
Yeah. I think it would be hugely impactful. Yeah. Carolyn, we're going to get on it.
Yes, we're going to be on that. Yeah, for sure.
Super.
Conrad, thank you so much for everything you're doing, bringing this awareness, and your podcast and your movie. It's what needs to be done. And congratulations, you're doing an amazing job.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks you. And thanks for having me on the program. And just thanks for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
And we wish you the best of luck in whatever's next. Here on the show, we always remind everybody who is watching, if they see something, if they feel something, if they know something's wrong, sound the alarm.
Save a life.
Absolutely.
Bye.